Hi, and welcome to this edition of the Spirit of the Valley. We are continuing our lovely annual visit with the Prouty components, and today we're lucky to have the Ultimate Bikers, and this is a new part of, not the newest, but almost part of the Prouty that is beyond a lot of people's dreams of riding 200 miles in 2 days. But this is Jane McLaughlin, who's been here before and an avid, almost probably every day now, racer or rider.
Rider.
The wrong R. And Brian Nolan, who is, you were actually the brains behind this, if I'm not mistaken, or at least helping the impetus.
Well, I'm the chairman of the event. I wouldn't say I was the brains behind it. It was actually the brainchild, I think, of Gene Brown, the executive director of the Friends. Right. And this event is modeled after a similar event in Massachusetts that benefits Dana-Farber, the Pan Mass Challenge. So that's where the idea came from, and it was Gene's idea, and it started in, the first ride was in 2008, so this will be our 5th annual Prouty Ultimate coming up on July 13th.
Wow. Yeah, they go the day before the original Prouty. They go down to Manchester overnight, ride up 100 miles on Friday. Saturday, they're right out there with the rest of us, people that don't get that far. You've been doing it, what, this will be a 3rd year?
No, this will be my 4th.
4th!
Although the first year I did 100 on Friday, and then I did 50 on Saturday.
Yep.
So I participated in the Ultimate, but for 3 years I've done the full 200.
That's wonderful. Gene said one day, I remember saying, you know, it isn't as overwhelming as you think, because if you go down and do the 100 up to here, we're not going to go out on Saturday and chase you around and make sure you do the second 100.
Didn't want to set the bar too high.
No, I know people do it, but there isn't a pressure that says, oh, I'm dying, but I've got another 20 miles to go. It doesn't happen that way. The Prouty doesn't do that on any level. They want it to stay fun. They want it to stay doable and have no one limp away saying, I'll never see a bike again.
Right.
So tell me a little more about the logistics, where you start from, where you end up in Manchester, and all the little things that people wouldn't have a clue about.
Well, I can speak to people that are starting from the Upper Valley, and the Prouty really takes care of a lot of those details. We all meet at the old medical school parking lot, and there is a huge truck that's there with several volunteers who put our bikes very carefully, wrap them up in wrap them up in blankets and get them in the truck, and then there are a couple of coach buses.
Wow.
So all of our gear and bikes go down to Manchester on, and this would be Thursday night, the night before. And we're down at Southern New Hampshire University, and we check into the dorms, the air-conditioned dorms.
Oh!
Which has been key some years, And we have a really, really nice dinner where probably 100 of us are together.
They do it for you?
This is a part of our registration fee.
Prouty puts it on.
Yes.
They do it, but they subsidize
Yes,
it.
and you know, in all fairness, we pay a registration fee that covers those kinds of costs.
Good.
Because it's important
because
that
there's so many more.
And most of our money should be going towards cancer research and patient services, so we cover those kinds of costs.
Good.
But it's nice because a lot of camaraderie happens the night before, and that kind of sets the stage for a great ride the next day.
I believe it, and it would certainly help a newcomer, I would think, too, the first time out, to have that feeling of I'm among people that know what they're doing, and they take me anyway.
Right, and that night there are also a couple of other things that happen, and Brian has been instrumental in getting some volunteers from the local bike shops who come down, and they go over every single bike to make sure that it's roadworthy. And if there are minor tweaks that need to be made, you know, there's a safety check that happens. And that's kind of a good feeling as you're going out the next day.
Well, for that long a ride, and the next day you're not going to have time to fix anything either. So I had not heard that. I think that's a marvelous extra piece to that.
Yeah, we've had to grow that. Actually, we have several local bike shops, the Bike Hub and Drumlin's Custom Cycle. They come down with us, and then several of the bike shops down in the Manchester area also provide technical services. So Good Ale's Bike Shop and Blue Steel Cyclery.
See, these are details people like myself have never thought about. That just you assume everyone checks their bike here.
Right.
not before the, and how much better
It actually
can be
saves
than-
us, I coordinate a lot of the support for the event, and actually saves us a lot on the other end, because a fair number of people surprisingly don't get their bikes checked, and I would recommend everybody does that
Yes.
before the Prouty, even if you're doing the 20-mile ride, get your
Yes.
bike checked out. And a surprising number of people don't do it, and that creates for a lot of problems on the road. So if we catch a lot of those things up front, it's actually much easier for us to look over the bikes up front than it is to deal with somebody who
Roadside
has a problem.
assistance.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, getting the support to people when they need it on the road is a different thing altogether. It's much easier to do it if everyone's together in one place.
I'm impressed that people from here are willing to go down and,
Well, we start at, there's, at least last year, there were 3 waves that went out.
okay?
I think it was 5:30, 5:45, and 6 a.m. So you don't want to have to wake up and think about how do I get to Manchester for a 5:30 start.
Although some people do it.
Well, maybe,
This year,
yeah.
I think they'll be starting probably 5:45, 6 o'clock, and 6:15 will be when we have unlike the 100-mile or any of the Prouty events on Saturday, the ultimate on the first day is a mass start. So everyone starts together. Initially in 2008 we had 21 riders, so starting 21 people at one time didn't pose any significant safety issue really, but as the event has grown, starting over 100 people together at one time does present some safety concerns, and so we've instituted or put a cap on it. We won't start more than about 50 riders at a time just for safety reasons. We do for the first about 5 miles until we get outside of the Manchester city limits have a police escort and have the entire lane to ride in, so people are riding next to each
There's a
other
jumbo
and
pace
close.
line.
Just
Yeah,
love the visual.
but many people who lots of people who train and come down to do the event the first time they're riding with 50 other people around them. Just little moves and people could wind up taking each other out. So we don't overstart the event, and we have, like I said, 3 groups that start.
Because I've seen even on Route 10 groups of what looked to me like a little larger than I would ever ride in, just because it would be a domino effect. I could just see it happening when they were.
Yeah, and everybody's that
seriously
close.
pumped.
Yeah.
So I think obviously pacing is brilliant, and when you've got that many all starting, it's like watching the beginning of the marathon.
Right.
You wonder why there aren't people trampled to death in that.
Another fun thing that happens that Thursday night, for whatever reason, the Prouty is always timed with the Tour de France. So in the dorms, there's always the tour on TV. And you sort of
Motivation.
sit down it's motivating, it's exciting, and you end up talking to people as you're watching the race.
Yeah.
And, again, it just kind of builds up this idea that there's one big team out there the next day.
Well, you more and more you speak, the more you feel like it's camaraderie at that point. That's
Yeah, I
probably
think the
more
thing
than ever.
the ultimate offers a couple of opportunities. Obviously, it offers you an opportunity to go the extra mile, so to speak, in the fight against cancer, and that. In that, it's a venue, an event, which 200 miles. That's an opportunity for you to tell people, I'm doing this is a big
Yes.
deal, and donate more money.
It's a great fundraiser.
So it's good from that standpoint, and it also being that it's a group start, and we have an opportunity to be together the night before. It really allows people to come together and develop this. Camaraderie that focuses around the cause. Everybody's there for a similar reason.
Exactly.
Their brother, their mother, their friend, somebody was affected or touched by cancer, and so that I think helps breed this camaraderie. Also, just like Jane says, everybody's into biking. It's the tour. It's
well, you must be
training.
making new friends. I mean, there are people each year that come on board that you may not
And there's
know.
and after now 5 years into the event, we have significant retention of riders. So we have people who come back every year, and so there are people who you'll see year after year coming back.
I remember doing registrations last year and watching you were in one of the first waves of people that arrived back at Richmond School, and it was really very almost emotional, I would say, to realize where you had just come from and what you still had ahead of
Right.
you. It just was very, I don't know how you all felt, it's just to watch you all walk in the door, and I just thought, oh my God, I know where they've just been, and it just seemed, and it wasn't even late in the day, and it just seemed like a huge deal. But there are logistics, like you've just mentioned, the bike people going down there is phenomenal.
There are also our sweep riders.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe 6 or 8. And they're identified by the kit that they have
Okay.
on. And they, not only do they pick up the end, but they also are positioned at sort of key intersections to make sure that everybody stays on the right course.
Good.
I was the beneficiary of, the first year I did it, of riding a lot of it with the sweep rider, because
really?
I was towards the rear. But it was really nice to know that I couldn't be last and fall back, you know, that there was somebody that was riding there with me.
We do.
And it was a safer ride as you'll ever take, probably.
Right.
We have, like as Jane says, we have about 8 support riders, and the idea is that several of them are actually bike mechanics. So, because this event starts basically all together, we have to move the support along with the ride. Unlike the Prouty is an all-day event, and we have the way the support works there is that generally there are bike shops which go back and
Right.
forth between a SAG or one section, and there's constantly people. But in the ultimate, the event will only be in one section of this 100-mile course for a
Right.
brief period of time. So our support has to,
It's-
be able to
it's
move
one group
along.
moving, not
Right. So
endless
we
numbers.
have several support vans which travel along with the group, but also several mechanics that ride their bike along with people, and then several support riders who, their main goal is to essentially make sure people aren't riding by themselves if they don't want to be.
Right.
And I think that's important. It does stretch out. Everybody starts together, but 50 miles into it, it starts to spread out. It gets pretty hilly, and people are kind of riding at their own pace. And if somebody wants somebody to ride along with, there's somebody that'll be available.
That's good for people to know, particularly ahead of time, because they may fear that they aren't in a group yet or haven't done it before, therefore they don't know someone they know they're going to ride actually with, to know that they won't be alone for long,
Right.
if they are at all. I think that's cool. Okay, so when do you actually leave Hanover?
We leave about 4 o'clock Thursday
Okay.
afternoon.
And all of you, let's see, you came back by about 1 or 2, was it last year?
Yeah, I think the first people finish, at about noontime.
Okay.
Probably the fastest riders finish about noon,
Okay.
and then I think most people are done by about 3. So there's kind of a pretty wide variety of folks, and I would say, having been involved in the event every year and really getting to know most everybody who's doing it, my take is that for the most part, and maybe it's surprising, but I don't think that the average fitness of an ultimate rider is really much different than the average fitness of a century rider. I think that largely these are people who are more motivated by the cause,
I think that
and
would be true.
want to go the extra mile to raise the extra money. But there's it's not all Lance Armstrongs. There's some people who are certainly very fit, very good cyclists, but there's plenty more people. The vast majority of people are really just people who are inspired by this.
Inspired, and they've taken on a new challenge. A lot of us
Yeah.
like to add challenges to our lives
Right,
regularly,
and
and
just
that's
to
the kind
speak
of thing.
to Brian's point, I think that there are a lot of people whose eyes glaze over at the thought of doing back-to-back centuries. And not that it isn't a wonderful achievement, at the same time, it really speaks to somebody who's willing to put some time in the saddle.
Amen.
And that if you're willing to get out ahead of time and simply get a lot of base mileage, you'll be able to do it. It's not, you won't be able to do it in 5 hours, but you'll absolutely be able to do it. And I think it's a wonderful goal as people age and all to have, that it feels like a significant accomplishment. You've contributed at least $2,500 towards cancer research, which is pretty wonderful, and you'll walk the next day easily.
Well, that's the other thing. I think I talked to people afterwards and saw them, and no one looked any the worse for wear.
Right.
It just, if you've been riding regularly, or I know plenty of people who do their Prouty without a whole lot of training.
Right,
And they
right.
they just do it.
I think the ultimate, if you can ride 100 miles, then you can ride 100 miles on back-to-back days.
Yeah.
It takes probably the biggest hurdle is to learn a little bit about recovery, hydration. I mean, the difference, the biggest difference is really just that, you have to be thinking the first day, you have to be thinking the whole time about the second day in terms of, how hard you're riding, how much you're drinking, how much you're eating, what you're going to do when you're done, take a nap and get something to eat, and be thinking the first day.
Ooh, one other key thing.
The massage.
Massage.
Right, yeah.
This is what that word I heard as much as any when people were walking through Richmond last year was, where is it?
Yeah.
And you were one of them. I looked at you and I thought, perfect. I mean, not that you look like you needed it, you don't, but that's a real gift.
Yeah,
I
we
think
have
that's a marvelous idea.
massage therapists at the finish, and pretty much everybody takes advantage of,
So,
of that.
Can anyone can do that, right, at the end of Prouty period? Or
Yeah,
not?
it's just that we have the opportunity is much better for an ultimate. There's 100 people getting massages as opposed to 3,000.
Yeah.
So and
It's a much longer
Maybe
Yeah,
massage on
there's your
Friday.
motivator.
Right,
You're
yeah.
getting a better shot at the masseuse.
Right.
But I think you're right what you say about it's daunting until you do it, and then you realize it was just a longer bike ride than you've done before. But it wasn't.
And certainly they were roads I'd never been on before.
Yeah.
The Friday is an absolutely beautiful ride
I've
up
heard
from
that.
Manchester. It's got a bit of elevation.
Yep.
It's probably a harder ride
Yep.
than Saturday is, but you're going by some beautiful lakes. You're going over by Moose Mountain.
See?
It's just it's a glorious ride.
Well, and not that the other day isn't. I think riding around the 50 or the whatever is pretty, but I think this
Right, and they're
you
new
just have many
roads
more
for-
opportunities
yeah,
in
for
100
most of
miles,
us.
obviously.
You know.
Yeah, new roads
Right,
that
because
you wouldn't have been driving on.
Most of us train on parts of the second day of the Prouty
Yeah.
since we live up here.
Right.
But what's nice on that Friday is, and also to get a bit of an urban ride, which
Yeah.
we don't get as we come
Do you
from
know anyone that
Manchester.
goes down ahead of time and does this?
I don't.
Have you ever heard of anyone practicing that first 100?
Well, there are some people who live in that area who ride stretches of that course
Yep.
routinely.
Now, how many from the Upper Valley versus south of us, or west or north? I mean,
Right now, from the Upper Valley, probably about half of our riders are
Okay.
from this area.
Okay.
We have a smaller percentage of riders where some of our goals from in terms of marketing and recruiting has been to try and reach outside of Vermont and New Hampshire and to other areas, and we have in recent years been able to recruit people from Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Boston area. But that only that cohort of people is probably about a third total.
have you ever heard of any that do the virtual, that do 200 miles somewhere
I don't
else?
think we've had anyone do that. The 200 mile.
I know a lot of people do that.
Do
for
the
regular
virtual,
Prouty.
Right,
I
but
don't-
you've never heard of anyone doing a
Not that I know of,
back-to-backer?
no.
That may be your next goal, is to find someone out in the middle of nowhere that's
Right.
going to ride 200
Right.
miles.
But the fundraising isn't virtual. They have to
Oh,
raise
no, the fundraising couldn't be more real.
Right.
That is why we're here.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, my goal, I told Jean on a PSA that my goal is 100 next year and 200 after that.
Good for you,
And it
Judy.
makes you want to just, I think goals are good, and I think it just makes you push
Yeah.
yourself harder.
And this is an
Absolutely.
achievable goal.
And I said it on the radio, so I,
Right.
there's a record now.
The one thing that somebody has to be able to do as far as time goes, they have to be able to do a couple of back-to-back long rides ahead of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Not 100 and 100,
No,
but
yeah.
they ought to get up to maybe 50 and
50.
60 or
I think
or
that's
something
the
like that.
Yeah.
really the key to training. Even more than how many miles you put in a week is when you ride on back-to-back days. Because really, the thing that you have to get over is getting your body ready to get back on the bike, and
Exactly.
you're going to be a little sore and stiff when you get on there at first, but the more your body gets used to doing that, training on back-to-back days, the better off you'll be.
and your body probably doesn't take that long
No,
to adjust the next morning.
no, I think my experience has been that probably the first 10 miles of the second morning are probably the first
Little
10
cranky.
miles. Yeah, the first
Going
10
up that
miles
long, long
and
hill toward line.
the first 10 miles and probably the last 20 miles of that ride. And you know, generally find your groove in between, but the first 10 miles are pretty stiff, and then the last 10 miles, no matter how much you eat or drink, you're gonna
That Chieftain Hill looks like
you're gonna
Kilimanjaro.
be feeling it coming
But
back.
something also happens as far as the adrenaline that kicks in, and I've heard lots of people who've been involved in other events say the same thing, that you know, if you can normally do 50 or 60, there's something about being around hundreds of other riders and having this great SAG stops and the signs along
Yeah.
the road and all of that
There's-
just makes
there's
you...
a huge
There are enough people lining the
Yeah.
roads, at least at this
Right.
end,
Right.
cheering you on. That always
makes
helps.
a big difference.
We have 6 SAG stops for the Prouty Ultimate the first day. There are
that's
6
good.
stops, and it's definitely an area. And you know, most people, lots of riders are coming together, so the SAG stops are generally have lots of riders at it, and I think people really find a lot of energy and you know, from the SAG and just being around each other and.
And you can also vent.
Right, right,
At some point you're going to
Commiserate,
say,
yeah.
we're not there yet, you mean
Right.
there's more?
Right.
right. Right. One other thing that
Yeah.
the Prouty offers, which is pretty nifty, is it's a $2,500 minimum if you register by yourself. However, if you register with somebody, the minimum comes down to $1,750.
What
It's
do you
called
call it,
having
ultimate?
an ultimate.
Ultimate.
And it's just kind of a way to recruit more
Yeah,
riders.
come
But
and- yeah.
$1,750 is substantially less than $2,500.
It is, and it sort of fosters that buddy system feeling too. of
Exactly,
having-
Right.
exactly.
You know one person at least is going
Right.
to be riding with you if you
Right.
get them.
And about 85% of the riders take advantage of that.
I'm not surprised.
No, and what's also kind of neat is that some of them that think, okay, it'll only be $1,750, they end up raising the $2,500 anyway. But the entry point of $1,750
Right.
feels a little bit
Yeah,
more
and
doable.
it takes away, I mean, it makes them probably a little more interested and charged toward fundraising if they haven't
Right.
done as much to begin
Right.
with. I think, I mean, you just mentioned all the reasons why you have to have that extra fee. There's a lot going on down there that has to be covered, and it has, don't want, I mean, you want to save as much as you can for the funds that
Right.
it's going to, but you get a lot for that money. And the people that are supporting you, I don't know, it would make me want to support someone even more, I think, if they were
Yeah,
doing that.
People do very well. You know, the fundraising. Our participants do very well in terms of fundraising, and you know, there's you know, last year we had 109 people who did the event. You know, which is a pretty small fraction of the total number of people doing the Prouty, but
Right.
Ultimate participants raised about 15% of the total amount of money that was raised by the Ultimate, and
Isn't that something?
about 25% of people raise more than $3,000, you know, doing this. So there's quite a few people who, you know, do very well from you know, fundraising for this event, and the event in general has been increasing. And the amount that we raised last year is close to $400,000, and
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is
I mean,
amazing
that's
for
a
an
big
event that's
chunk
only
of
5
change.
years old.
That's a big chunk. It would be a big chunk 10 years down the road, but this is 5 years, and the growth of it. I think one of the most fun parts about the Prouty anyway is the growth. The rowers expect to double this year. It's only their second year. The bikers' numbers are going up, not happening to be capped yet, but
Right.
they won't. They're hoping for the another
Walkers,
route.
the walkers are
The
growing.
walkers are growing. I mean, folks, there's something for everybody out there. We've said this before and we'll say it again. There's just almost no reason not to do it. I've seen wheelchairs, I've seen strollers, I've seen the tag-alongs on the bikes up and down Lime Road or in and
Another
around the
thing
walking areas.
You see in the Ultimate is you see people with survivor bibs on, and there's something about you know, realizing that
That
someone
just-
who has survived cancer and is now able to do
To do
back-to-back
it back-
centuries is
in the century
pretty
particularly,
wonderful.
I think I'm
Pretty
so glad they
wonderful.
do designate that.
Yeah.
in our demographic of riders, you know, we have certainly a percentage of people who are survivors. We have, you know, in recent years, and Jane has been a big part of this, we've tried to recruit more women to do the event. Last year, we had about 45% of the you know, riders with
Almost half.
Jane's help recruiting women. That was
really cool.
impressive. And we've also, the majority of our riders are in probably the the 30 to 55, or probably 40 to 55 age range, although we've had, last year, our oldest rider was 66. Our youngest rider
that
ever...
Pat?
I don't know if it was...
I could go in and be the oldest. Was that worth anything?
You'll get an announcement. Probably could, help you raise money. But our youngest rider was 14, and this year we have someone who's 11 signed up to do it. So.
I just marvel at numbers like that. I just, these kids nowadays, thank heavens we're not in that kind of, we're in an area where everybody's active and pretty healthy and fit. And
starting last year, we formed a group of women that train together.
Good.
And we're the ultimate women. We're having 2 rides this weekend, for instance, and we try to get rides posted every week.
That's great.
And we've had a maintenance clinic at Bike Hub, and
nice.
Dick Drummond put on a cycling seminar.
Are those the
on
maps you put on
performance.
Facebook? Are those
Yes,
the women?
yes, exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
I love watching that.
And it's a lot easier to get out and get your training miles in when
Well,
you know that you don't have to do it on your own.
I'm not going to do it alone. I practice with various people, but nothing
a lot
as formal
easier,
as
doesn't it?
yours. But it's a lot more fun. And my husband will get a survivor bid this year, which is cool. I don't know if
That's
he'll put one
fantastic.
on. I have a feeling he won't, but
Oh, that's something to wear with pride.
I think I want it to be, but he's played it down so much so far that I don't think he will. Unbelievably, we've just used up this half hour.
Wow.
It's unbelievable how fast things go when you're passionate about something. And the Prouty shows go faster than anything else because everyone involved in it is just so passionate about it.
Well, I think, as you said, there really is something for everybody.
There is something. The walkers and
The
Mark-
volunteers.
Well, 1,200, Carolyn said yesterday. That's a lot of people out there. When you look at every single person that's manning a SAG station or a registration or so many things, and recruiting them. And
One of my favorite personal memories is the summer that my mom died. She was passing out ribbons the Friday before the
see,
Prouty,
that's
and it was just it's just a
you
wonderful.
can't, you'll
yeah.
always remember that. I was telling you a story about my mother telling me I could get up chieftain when I thought I couldn't one year, and I could hear her fiercely competitive voice saying, "Well, I think I could do it. I know you could." And that's just what I was
cheering,
feeling,
yeah.
and I just
Yeah.
suddenly just
Yep.
took off. And there's so many inspirational things about this
It's a
event.
very poignant event.
Very poignant, and it never won't be. So all of you out there, the ultimate is the one that's Friday the 13th. Forget the date, no connotation there. And then the next day, the 14th, for the second 100. And you need to get going on registering. Theprouty.org is where you will find everything you need to know, how to register, they walk you through it. It's a beautifully easy, friendly site. If you want to do the ultimate and biking in general, get going, because you need to get registered and then start raising big bucks. But the ultimate is a whole new fun feature, and I think everyone's enjoying hearing how it's growing. And there are that many more people every year that want to do it, push themselves.
Thank you, Judy, for
push
giving
it.
it such a great plug.
Yes,
I think it's
thank
the
you.
best shows we do all year are the Prouties. I'm passionate about it. I'm now working 3 different volunteer jobs at DHMC, and that's my life now.
I think that just one other thing about it
Yeah.
is I think many people are intimidated by either the fundraising and or the miles, and I think if you've talked to anyone who's done it, they would say it was absolutely worth every ounce of effort that they put into it, and also much more doable than they probably thought.
I think they totally underestimate themselves on the course. I think, and I know I did once. The first time out, I thought I would go as far as I could go. Heck with it, and before you knew it, we'd done the full thing. So,
We're going to
anyway,
be flying after you in
you're
another
going to
year
be
or
coming
two.
after me. I hope you will. Jane and Brian, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming in. It was a delight, and it's just one more piece of this event that makes it worth all the promotion we can give it. And just remember, you can pick these up lots of places, but there's a lot.
Prouty.org.
Prouty.org has so much information, and it's so easy to get on there. Or if you want to volunteer, there's in the menu on the left side. Anything you want to do with this, you can do. So please do it. Thank you again, both of you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
And so thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next time.